Welcome to Whitestone Missionary Baptist Church, 187 South Parkway East in Memphis, Tennessee. We want to thank you for joining us on live stream on YouTube and Facebook. We want to thank our media ministry team, Reverend Henderson, and ably assisted by Sister Fletcher, and a guest media ministry team member, Brother Eric. And thank you to the Whitestone trustees for sponsoring this. The lesson 94, since we began this series during the pandemic, the fifth for the spring quarter. The subject this morning or this week is concern for a weaker brother. That could mean concern for a weaker brother or sister. And you want to put it more practical, concern for a weaker Christian, or fellow Christian. The Bible text which this subject is lifted from is 1 Corinthians chapter 8, the first 13 verses, another one of Paul the Apostle's letters. The theme for 1 Corinthians is Christian conduct. The theme for March 6th through the third Sunday of this month, which is Easter Sunday, instructions for a troubled church. The theme for the spring quarter is training. The golden text is verse 13. I'll just read that aloud, and in all due respects to our current superintendent of Sunday School, Sister Carolyn Robinson Brooks, and our superintendent emeritus, Brother William Baskin. Verse 13 reads, "Wherefore, if meat make my brother to offend, I will eat no meat while the world stands, lest I make my brother to offend." John Lody, L-O-D-Y, one of our commentators for this series of lessons, has a comment which I feel can be helpful to all of us. He said the particular context plainly places Paul's emphasis on the refraining from anything, not just meat, but anything that might cause a fellow Christian to be led astray from the path of holiness to which we are all called in Christ. You can check that out on page 67. Our chief commentator, of course, is John Lody. Now, I may be wrong on that, and I think I am, and I want to correct that before I go further. Our chief commentator is Robert Ferguson, Jr. We can change that to Robert Ferguson, Jr., those of you who might have that before you. The lesson is divided into three parts. Section 1, love is greater than knowledge. That's the first three verses. The issue of food, verse 1, and verses 2 and 3 highlight the issue of knowledge. And section 2, love is greater than adultery, verses 4 through 6. Verse 4 highlights the emptiness of idols. And verses 5 and 6 talks about the sovereignty of God. Section 3, love is greater than liberty. That's verses 7 through 13, the last section of our lesson text, which I read, which I gave you at the beginning of the hour. Verse 7 highlights understanding fellow believers. Verse 8 through 11 highlights loving fellow believers. And the last two verses, 12 and 13, highlight caring for fellow believers. Now, there's some key words. I may or may not go through all of them, but key words that we should understand, key words defined. Love, which most of us understand to a degree, but love is handled so loosely. It means to adore, to like very much. Attachment formed because of an affection for. Cherish. Understanding means insight, sharpness of mind, showing comprehension, a spirit of discernment. Veganism means strict vegetarian diet. No meat at all. Vegetarian is a meatless diet, but there are some people who are vegetarian, will eat certain animal product, they'll drink milk and what have you. Pagan, godless, believes not in God, but in images only. Sovereignty means absolute rule. That's where God comes in. That's why we call him the sovereign. Meat in this context talks about the substance of the body, flesh of animals for food. Knowledge means information, ability, or information ability, awareness, know-how, and that comes from information. You get the facts, and then you learn how to do something. Commend, I commend you. That means I recommend, I praise you, hats off to. Brethren, in this context, could mean brother or sister, female or male, whoever is in Christ. Stumbling block, obstacles to belief, to understanding, and progress. Conscience means moral sense of duty. Even if you're not a Christian, you ought to have so much in you as a human being that you don't do certain things, you don't cross certain lines. For example, a lion is not going to come in your yard unless you mess with him, or unless he's hungry. And unless you mess with a bear, he's not coming and knock on your door or break through your door. But human beings will. Embolden, E-M-B-O-L-D-E-N, means courage to inspire, to encourage, to inspire one to greater height. Wherefore, we often see in the King James Version, the old English language, wherefore, that means for what purpose, for what reason. Howbeit, we often see that in the King James Version. However, although, that's what that really simply means. Offend simply means to displease, to insult, to anger, to disgust. Liberty, we often hear about liberty and justice. Liberty simply means freedom, and it doesn't mean freedom, it means freedom to think, freedom to go, freedom to act responsibly. It's a choice, it's a right, it's a privilege. Mature means grown up, development, seasoned, disrespect. That means rudeness, dishonor, contempt. And we live in an age now where disrespect is becoming all too common. Weak, I know that word is common, but W-E-A, weak means deficient, feeble, not very strong, frail at best. So we have to be concerned and we have to be compassionate for those who are weaker than we are. And we are weaker than somebody else. There's somebody stronger than you. No matter how strong I am, there's somebody stronger. No matter how strong or how weak I am, somebody's weaker. So we have to love one another. Adultery means honoring and worshiping false gods, pagan symbolism of insulting the true God. God, of course, I should have had a small g, G-O-D-S. The small g means idols, not holy. Anytime you see G-O-D, the small g, you're talking about idols. The true God, you always spell that with a capital G. Never refer to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob with a small g. Always a capital G, which is symbolic of honoring him for his sovereignty over the entire world. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to skip one section. There are 10 questions on page 65 in the Bible Expositor and Illuminator. And number one, I'll give you short answers for it. What was the main consideration Paul deals with in this chapter, chapter 8 of 1 Corinthians? Well, he begins, chapter 8 begins with Paul considering a question raised concerning food, particularly meat in that particular instance, had been offered to idols. Number two, what is the main difference between knowledge and love? Paul points out that knowledge by itself puffs up. It can lead to arrogance and selfishness. And see, a lot of people have knowledge and they hoard it over folk who are ignorant. Love, on the other hand, builds up, seeks the benefit of others. If you truly have the love of God, you want everybody around you to be lifted. You want everybody around you doing well. Page 62. Number three, what is the problem with having knowledge without love? Well, short answer, knowledge without love looks impressive at first, but it quickly becomes unattractive as the one who is puffed up uses his knowledge or her knowledge to tear down other believers rather than encourage them. Christians should always be in the business of helping to inspire, to encourage. That's why people attend worship, or that's why we worship by way of television, YouTube, Facebook, because we're seeking to be enhanced by the Spirit of God, by the love of God, and we want to spread that enhancement. Number 4, what is the greatest blessing of loving God? Well, those who love him are known by him. Page 62. 5, what did Paul understand about idols that the pagans did not? Short answer, Paul's knowledge that came from knowing God told him that idols were simply man-made objects with no authority. Page 63. Number 6, what is the main difference between the pagan gods and the one true God, which I've talked about for the past 5 or 6 minutes? Well, short answer, humans create a multitude of gods in earthly images. We can idolize ourselves, idolize our cars, idolize our animals, idolize our houses, idolize our achievements. But the one and only true God has made people in his image. A God made in the image of man is not a God at all. Page 63. Number 7, to whom do we owe our existence? Short answer, page 63, Jesus Christ. Number 8, why was eating food offered to idols such a stumbling block for some Christians in Corinth? Well, short answer, many Corinthians had honestly believed and trusted in Christ. They believed in Christ. They accepted Christ. But for many of them, eating food that had been offered to idol gods still felt like adultery and was a great stumbling block to their newfound faith. Page 64. Number 9, how do other people's weaknesses often show us our own weaknesses? Short answer, just because a brother or sister may be weak in one area never merits our disrespect. In fact, if we judge them, it shows that we are weak in Christian love, which is even worse. Page 65. And finally, number 10, what does it sometimes cost us as Christians to help a brother or sister mature in the faith in Christ Jesus? Well, what does it cost you? Laying aside some of your personal rights and privileges. Page 65. Now, there are some quotes and notes to think on, and I'll just share several. Ferguson, our chief commentator, tells us that there's never an excuse to neglect loving another person. Page 65, also he said, we all must understand that everyone has a different level of maturity and understanding of spiritual things. We all are not on the same level. We all not on the same level in any fashion. You can be in a classroom with a person and everybody grasps the information at a different pace, different level. He added, preferring personal liberty over another person's soul is sin in itself. Lodi on page 66 stated that there are 3 main goals for this lesson text. The first one, we are to learn the difference between just loving knowledge or having knowledge and having love for our brothers and sisters in Christ. Second, we are to understand that although knowledge can be helpful, being proud of your knowledge does not show love for our brothers and sisters in Christ. Finally, the third goal of this lesson text, we are to strive, work hard at it, above all for genuine humility and love in our behavior toward others. That's why we live in a culture now where even in traffic, there's a lack of respect. People jump in front of you, people run the stop signs, they run the lights, they pass, or they pass where the line says don't pass. They don't seem to care about kids walking across the crosswalk when the light is on in their favor. And that's a lack of disrespect. That's a lack of disrespect for human beings. And that's a lack of respect for self. Now, Powell lists on page 68 6 practical points. I will cite just 3 of them. Number 1, unity in God's kingdom is built on love. And there's no other way around it, not on pride in knowledge. See verse 1 in our lesson text. And I'll pick out number 5. Mature believers, mature brothers and sisters in Christ, help others grow in faith by choosing love over personal liberty. See verses 7, 8, and 9. Number 6. Be aware that young Christians look to mature Christians for their examples. Like when we're older, I don't care if you're 21, 18, or 88. Little children look to us as mature Christians to help guide them to a stronger faith in Christ. Mark Winter said this: we must be careful to temper our knowledge and liberty with the love of God. Everything centers around the love of God. Dahlquist, under the children's section of this book, like adults, children, especially those 7 and under, often like to exercise their freedoms regardless of who it hurts. It's just like a child, and some grown people act just like children. They want what they want right now. They don't care where they are. They can be in an opera, and they're going to scream and yell until they get that Bible. That's the nature of a human being without Christ. The main focus of this lesson text is found on page 73, and I thought this stands out more than anything else in my mind. 2 things are clear here. First, learn the value of being sensitive to the feelings of other people. That's what Christians are about. If my sitting on that seat with a deodorant that offends that person, I need to move. And for me to have an attitude where let her move, let him move, you're not sensitive to the feeling. Because I love Aquavella, but I can't handle it because it bothers my sinuses. So, a person wearing Aquavella, I just move. I don't say anything to them because they can handle that. I can't. Ferguson gave me something to ponder on in the next section. He said, love is the priority of a Christian life. Now, I know people love to talk about love, but love, by the devil's standards, is symbolic of being hateful toward God. God bless you, and I hope that you will join us at our morning worship. I want to thank our media ministry team. I want to thank you for listening. God bless you.